Hello. My name is Calvert Boyle. I am the Makerspace Coordinator for EPCC, and today I will be showing you the basics of Tinkercad. So, first you're going to open up a new web page, and you're going to type in www.tinkercad.com. Apologies for the slow loading times. Okay, so it's going to bring you to this page right here. Now, if you have used Tinkercad before, then you're just going to go ahead and sign in. If you have never used the site before, you're going to head and click the Join Now. So I understand that most of y'all who are going to be watching this video are students, and naturally you would want to try and join a class. Don't worry about these. These are mainly built for elementary students. If they are part of a class that's learning about 3D design, you're going to go ahead and create your own personal account for this case. It's mainly just the basics, what's your email, what's password, are you above the age of 12, stuff like that. So once you've created your account, you're going to go ahead and sign in. And once you have signed in, it's going to bring you to a general page like this. Your page is going to be blank though. I've been working with this software for years, so I've created like a ton of different designs. That's why I have all these little boxes here. But you're going to go ahead and create new design. So every time you want to create a new design, it's kind of bring you to this general work plane area. If you need to, well, the left clicker is how you click on items, click and drag on items. The right clicker is how you kind of change the view if you click and hold. You can also change the view by kind of clicking at this box right here, or if you need to kind of zoom in or zoom out, your little circle clicker on your mouse will work too, but if you need to, you can kind of just click on any of these one items. So we're going to click on home. Other portions include, the name, if you're going to import or export an item, work plane and ruler, all of your basic shapes. We'll get into this a lot more in a bit. So, in addition, if you need to, you can edit your grid size. So if you need to kind of make it bigger or smaller, depending on what item you're trying to create or what you're trying to do. You can change it from millimeters to inches. I always suggest leaving it in millimeters, mainly because it's a lot easier to do the math if you're trying to, create a very specific item. Inches can get a little bit rough, so I always suggest always clicking on millimeters. So, before we begin, let's go ahead and see what we will be basing our item on today. So, for those of you who are history buffs, you may know this woman. For those of you who are not, this is Boleyn. She was King Henry VIII's second wife, and this is the pendant she is famous for. This was the famous Boleyn pendant. So this is what we are going to be basing our kind of item off of today. So, before we begin, let's go ahead and kind of relabel. So this is and complete. What I like to start out with every single time is the ruler tool. This isn't necessary, but I honestly think it makes everything 10 times easier. If you go ahead and click on the work plane, wherever the ruler is, if you click and drag an item, you can go ahead and see all of the measurements that everything kind of measures out to. you know, how tall is it standing from the ground, how wide and tall is the object, how far away it is from the center point or wherever you put your ruler. If you do not have that, then if we click out to the ruler, you won't see any of those numbers. They kind of tend to disappear, and when you hover over these boxes, you can see the numbers, but it gets a little bit difficult if you need to kind of type in a very specific number. So I always suggest starting out with a ruler on your work plane. I just think it makes all of your projects 10 times easier. Okay, so to start off with the pendant, we're going to start off with the main bee. Now, if you scroll down in basic shapes, you will see the text option. You can use this option whenever you're designing your pendant, but what you can also do is if you go into text and numbers, you can go ahead and pick individual lettering and numbering. So if you're trying to create, you know, a basic acronym or anything like that, you can go ahead and click on these letters. If you're trying to get a specific font, or if you need to do something for like a plaque, I would go ahead and recommend text. But today we're going to just do a B. Like I said, you can zoom in with your kind of circular button on your mouse. Change the angle with the right click and hold. Now, I understand this is pretty small, you know, with what we're working with. So if you click and drag one of the corner boxes, you can go ahead and manipulate the shape. This only manipulates the XY kind of axis because that's the box that I'm clicking on. It doesn't really manipulate the Z axis. But if you want to keep a shape proportional to what you're trying to do, if you click and hold Shift while clicking on and dragging the corner box, it will change the item proportionally. That way you don't have to do like a ton of math. So we'll go ahead and set that off to the side. Since we have the bee done, we're going to go ahead and work on the pearls next. So in order to get our pearls onto the pendant, we are going to need to create a chain. Now, if you go to basic shapes and scroll down, you will see the torus item and the tube option. So I usually like to do the torus item just because it is circular. It kind of reminds you of more of a pendant. You don't always have to though. Some people like to use the tube option just because it's more straight. The printer doesn't have as hard of a time with, you know, more blocky items than it does with circular items. So some people prefer the tube because they think it's a lot easier. But today we're going to work on torus. So we will click and drag it out onto our plane. Again, this is a pretty small item, so we're going to go ahead and Shift and click to create it a lot bigger. We'll go ahead and turn it back to like a proportional size with the bee in a moment, but for right now we're going to work on it zoomed out like this. So we have one part of the chain done, so now we're going to do the next part, which we are going to copy and paste. Control C, Control V, and then whatever Mac users use. So now that we have our second piece, now, you know, usually some people just kind of like to add it like this and that's their chain. You can do it a different way. Whenever you are looking at a shape, if I can get into view, there are going to be these kind of circular arrows. This is how you turn an item at a certain degree, depending on, you know, what plane or axis you're trying to work with. You'll see that there are kind of two, let's zoom in for a little too much. There are two different circles. There's an inside circle and then there's an outside circle. So if you click on an item, say we'll click on this plane and you want to go with the inside circle, that's mainly, you know, it's just if you want to get like a quick 90 degrees, a quick 45 degrees, a quick like 180 degrees. The inside circle is most useful. If you're trying to get something very specific, like say, you know, 12 degrees, you can go ahead and click and drag on the outside of the circle. Say if you want to get a specific number, but your mouse is kind of very sensitive and you can't seem to get that exact number, you can go ahead and click on that degree number and type in what you want. So if I want exactly 37 degrees, I can go ahead and type that in, click enter, and it will put me at 37 degrees. So for our chain, we're going to keep it pretty simple. We're going to stay on the inside of the circle, click and drag to about 90 degrees. Now, depending on how you want to make your necklace, you can go ahead and kind of make it a movable chain so the pieces actually do come apart and it hangs like a real chain. That way, what you'll need to make sure is that nothing is touching in between these two items. So I'll go ahead and zoom in. Sorry, my mouse is like very sensitive. You can see that these two items are not touching at all. Some people though, you know, they don't want to deal with all that support material that's going to come with it. So they'll go ahead and just attach the two items so it's less for them to worry about. It doesn't necessarily act the same as a real chain, but it's a lot easier in terms of support material. So some people prefer that. And so as you can see, our chain isn't exactly level or straight. So what we're going to do is we want to align these two items to where they match. You know, they kind of look like they're going in a straight line. So what we're going to do is you have these different shapes up here. We're going to go to this one with the two rectangles, and that's going to be the align option. You're going to have all these options, you know, all these circles that you can kind of click on. You have the x-axis, the y-axis, and then the z-axis. The z-axis right here. Depending on how you want to do it. Now, if you just want to click on these, these first dots that show up, it will move both items to where they're center with each other. If you want to center one item to, or align one item with another, but you don't want that second item to move, you can go ahead and click on the item. And as you can see, all of the dots move to just this one item, and it will go ahead and align just the one item you're looking for. So it will align the first piece of the chain to the second piece of the chain. Go ahead and click escape to get out of that. All right, so we have the first part of our chain done. So in order to group an item so that you don't have to keep moving items individually, you're going to go ahead and click on this group icon. If you've accidentally grouped one too many things or you haven't grouped enough, you can go ahead and click the ungroup and try grouping it again. You can click on items individually if you, let's go ahead and ungroup this. So say for example, you know, I want to group these two items, but I don't want to group that one. You know, one way you could do it is you can click and hold the left clicker, and you'll see this red box pop up, and you can highlight over both items. And that's one way to do it. Now, unfortunately, Tinkercad is a bit sensitive when it comes to this feature. If you have something kind of floating above, so say you kind of moved an item out of the way and it's above these two items, sometimes the box will like think you're also including that item that's floating when we're not trying to. So another way to do it is to click on the item, hold shift, and then click on your second item. And just group them together. So we have that part done. We'll set that aside. Next, we are going to work on the pearls. So this is going to take two different shapes. We are going to use the half sphere shape, so click and drag onto the plane. And then we are also going to use the parabola shape. Click and drag. So, as you can tell, in order to make this kind of a the pearl shape that's kind of in the picture, what we'll want to do is we'll want to go ahead and flip this half sphere. Now, you can use these arrows if you want to flip it to 180 degrees, or you can use the mirror option, and you can mirror it on each different plane or axis. So we'll go ahead and mirror the z-axis. Click out of that. Okay, so now we'll want to align these two shapes. So we'll go ahead and click and drag to get both shapes highlighted. We're going to go use the align tool again. And I just want to align the parabola to the half sphere. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the half sphere. And then click on the two items that will get it into the half. In this case, you can't really choose the Z options. It kind of just makes it a really, the shape just kind of wants to go everywhere, so I wouldn't recommend it in this one case. So we'll go ahead and click out of that. So we'll zoom into our object just a little bit. So now, one way you can do this is you can take this top arrow right here and you can kind of move the item up and down. You can also, to have it float in the air, you can also click on this shape if you want it to have like an exact height. So our sphere is technically 10 millimeters tall. So we'll go ahead and click the 10. You can have something setting like pretty much precise on another object, but occasionally, I don't usually recommend this all the time, just because occasionally if you have it just a couple of millimeters off, like it's floating too high, or if it's just sitting exactly on top. Sometimes printers, the slicing program won't slice it correctly, and it will think it's two separate items rather than like one whole item. So what I like to do is, instead of having it exactly set on top of the item, I'd like to just push it down just a tad bit. So we'll go ahead and click 9.75. So that's just 0.25. So if we zoom in here, as you can, whoops, so sorry guys. As you can tell, there is this little point where, kind of a little strip where they both kind of run in together. So we know that they're connected. Okay, so now we are going to group these two items. And there you have your pearl. So now we're going to try and connect the pearl to the chain. Let's go ahead and make this bigger. So we'll click Shift and click and hold Shift and then make our item a lot bigger. So as you could tell in the image, they are very large pearls. And again, we will go ahead and kind of turn this sideways. We'll go ahead and turn it to 90 degrees. Kind of move it around. Now again, okay, so if you turn this kind of to where you're looking underneath, if it will pop up, you can see that the top arrow has moved down to the bottom arrow. So you can use it this way. Some people don't like to kind of look at it that way. So that is an option that you can use. Just so that you know that it's there. The arrow will pop back up again. Okay. So we'll go ahead, and again, you want to make sure that your item or your pearl is touching against this chain piece. So we'll go ahead, and as we can see, one trick that I like to use is that if I'm not 100% sure if these two items are touching, say that you're trying to get something very close, like you only need it to be like 2 millimeters on the inside of another object, and you're just not quite sure if it is, you know, intersecting or not, and you know, the camera isn't working with you, because occasionally you do get bad camera angles, just like in video games. You can go ahead and click on the shape, and I will... If you click this whole option, usually that's, you know, it's an option that cuts out of shapes and whatnot. But the way I like to do is I like to click on the whole option, and then I can see this shadow is cutting into this pearl shape, so we know that it actually is touching in both the items. So then we're going to click it back to a solid. Now, one thing that's important to note is you want to make sure that all of your items are individual colors. You know, they're different colors all around. Whenever you group an item, it is going to show up as one color, which is great. And what you want to do, the reason that you want to do that is because whenever you're grouping two items, say you're trying to group like 5 items at the same time, if they're all different colors and you see that like the one item on the end is not the same color as the others, then you know you haven't grouped them properly. If they're all the same color, sometimes you can kind of, you know, get confused on like what has and what hasn't grouped. So in order to save you a lot of time and trouble, you go ahead and just kind of, I'd advise turning them into different colors. So we're almost done with this section. We'll go ahead and shrink this down where it's more proportional with our B. So kind of put this into a better view. Okay, so again, you're mainly just going to make sure that not everything is highlighted. You're just going to click on this one item and you're going to copy and paste it just a couple of times, because there are 3 pearls. If we look at our picture, there are 3 different separate pearls. So what you can do is you can go ahead and move this up. Again, make sure that everything is touching. Now, some people, they like to get extra fancy, so they'll try and put it kind of, you know, put their little pearls at an angle. Go ahead and move this over. Move this one over. Kind of turn both of these outside ones into at a certain angle. And move them over just a tad bit. Okay, So as we can see, our pearls are kind of at the back of our bee rather than in the middle of our bee. So what we're going to do is we are going to just highlight over 2 of these, because you really only need 1 pearl to do this. You're going to click the Align tool again. You're going to click on your pearl section, and then this is where the Z-axis will come in handy. You're going to click the middle dot on the Z-axis, and this will kind of even out, you know, the kind of put the pearls into the middle of the bee. So next, we're going to focus on the top of the pendant. Don't worry, we're not going to do the entire, like, all of these pearls and all the chains. You know, we're not going to worry about that. We're mainly just going to focus on this pendant right here. And as you can tell, there's kind of like a small loop that kind of connects the bee to the rest of the necklace. So we're going to go ahead and use the tube option. Now, as you may have noticed, some of these shapes have different options, you know, for how you can manipulate the shape than others. So what we're going to do, we're going to change the color first, because the bee and the tube are the same color. So we're going to kind of change that to a light red, or salmon, as some like to put it. You can manipulate the radius. So if you want, you know, the radius of the inside of the circle to be smaller, you can go ahead and manipulate that. If you want to kind of change up the wall thickness, you can. We'll go ahead and put that at about 5. If you want to change up the sides, as you can tell, if you look real closely, there are several kind of straight angled sides. In Tinkercad, you can't get it like completely smooth. You can only get like so many sides added. So what I always like to do is, instead of 24, I just turned it up to 64. And essentially when you print it out, it's going to look smooth, but in Tinkercad, it doesn't look completely smooth. Again, the bevel is just, you know, how you want to angle something. The bevel segments is just how many segments, you know, how smooth do you want it. I always recommend putting it on the highest setting, of course, so it can be as smooth as possible. Okay, so we're pretty much done with the top part. So we'll go ahead and kind of move this over here. We're going to shrink this, so instead of 10, we're going to turn it to 5. Now that just manipulates the Z-axis instead of both like the A and B, or sorry, X and Y axis. I don't know why I said A and B. But we want to go ahead and make sure this is kind of centered. So we will kind of move our view, move this to about right here. Now we want to make sure that the top of our pendant, maybe you want to shrink it down a little bit. That can help. Oops, I forgot to click shift. Remember kids, always click and hold shift, because that just makes life a whole lot easier. So we'll kind of move that. Now again, you want to make sure that it kind of it's inserted into the other item, but it isn't kind of like poking out of any of the holes or anything like that. Oops. So you will click on your bee, turn that into a hole, and as you can see, it is cut into the bee, but it also isn't kind of poking out anywhere else. Same with the pendants and the pearls. So we'll go ahead and turn that back into a solid. We will zoom out. Okay, so now we're going to click and highlight over the entire item, all 5 shapes, and we're going to go ahead and group them. Alright, so you're pretty much done with this one pendant. I will show you how to export it in a moment, but before I do that, I want to go ahead and show y'all, you know, in Tinkercad, we've kind of been using the basic shapes. These are the items that people are going to mainly use. So we'll go ahead and, you know, use the basic shapes. We did go over text and numbers, you know, depending on like what you want to do. Another feature that is out here is the shapes generator. If you click on the shapes generator all, these are shapes that the Tinkercad community have made. So they kind of made different countries, you know, China, England, Australia. They've made, you know, stone walls if you needed to add like a texture to your print. Different ways that you can kind of maneuver text depending on like how you want to, or like different fonts that you may want to use. They do have a QR code, pie chart, you know, simple stuff like this. Gears, if you're trying to, you know, create like a gear shape, but you're just not able to get it just right. So you can go ahead and explore this. They have like several pages for the shapes generator, but we're just going to go back to the basic shapes. And again, you can explore around however you want to. Okay, so now we're going to export this file so that you can actually send it to the makerspace. So you're going to go ahead up into this corner and click export. Now, there is only one shape that we're working with, so obviously it's going to say the selected shape. If you have multiple shapes, you can go ahead and click everything in the design, but I wouldn't advise that. So I'd advise kind of exporting each shape as a separate shape. Say you have created an entire chessboard in Tinkercad. Rather than trying to export and slice the entire chessboard, you'll go ahead and export the queen separately, the knight separately, the rook separately, the pawn separately, all of them separately, and then if you've created a board, you can try and export that separately too. The thing is that whenever you try and do everything in the design and you have the bed, your work plane, laid out in a certain way, if your printer that you're printing with, or kind of whatever machine you're using, if it has a smaller bed than what's set to what the work plane is, you won't be able to get all of your shapes in the bed, and it will just try and look at it as one entire big shape, and it will be too big to fit on your bed. But if you export everything separately, you can go ahead and add them to the slicing program separately. And a lot of times what slicing programs will do is they'll rearrange them automatically to how they best fit on the bed. Not all the programs do that, but most slicing programs do that. So we always advise exporting items separately, so that if we have to break up your print in half, so say we can only print half of the chess pieces now, and then we have to wait until to print half the chess pieces later, we have that option. It's not all stuck onto like one bed. So for 3D printing, OBJ and STL are the most common file formats that people use. A lot of the printers will use these two file formats. We here at the Makerspace prefer STL. So what you're going to do is you're going to click the selected shape, and then you're going to click the .stl button, and it's preparing to export your item. Mine might take a moment. We'll go ahead and, oops, I always click on it way too soon. Show it in the folder. And as you can see, there is our pendant in the downloaded section. You can kind of copy and paste it. Depending on what size it is, you can usually upload it to whatever program we're using here at the Makerspace, or email it to us if you want to print something off. You do have that option. So that is pretty much the basics to Tinkercad.